Hi friends, Prepared Suburbanite here. Recently had the opportunity to do some research into the current slate of Democrat candidates for the presidency now that we're into the primary season. And I did some research, went to their websites, went to a couple of independent sites that rate the candidates' policies on the Second Amendment, and believe me, it's an eye-opener. So stick around, we'll get into some detail. It's honestly going to be really difficult to keep this brief and to the point. What I found was over 20 individual gun control policy statements and stands that the 5 leading Democrat candidates for president are trying to sell you, I guess. There's a couple that span all 5 candidates, and that's Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, and Mike Bloomberg. Now, while Mike hasn't been in the Iowa caucuses nor in the New Hampshire primary, he's a contender, and don't forget it. His gun control, he is Mr. Gun Control. So here we go. There's only just a couple of things that all 5 candidates agree on. Universal background checks, which is their way of saying that they want to criminalize private sales of handguns and rifles, etc. And they all endorse red flag laws, or in other words, extreme risk protection laws. So all 5 of those candidates do that. Now, we're going to get into 23 individual things. High capacity magazines, 4 out of 5. Pete Buttigieg doesn't mention it, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't thought of it. To totally ban assault weapons, whatever that means, however it's defined, and there could be a whole lot of different definitions out there, 4 out of 5 agree that that's part of their Second Amendment plan. The dissenter is Amy Klobuchar. She doesn't mention it in her platform on gun control, gun safety, gun violence, whatever you want to call it. The next is a voluntary buyback program. Only 2 candidates have mentioned that they would support a voluntary buyback program. Now, you can't buy back something that you never really owned in the first place, but that's neither here nor there. The 2 that support the voluntary buyback program are Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg. 3 out of 5 have mentioned that they want to take on the NRA. And I'm not sure exactly what that means, but after what I saw happen in New York State when they decided that they were going to crack down on the NRA, it could take many different forms. Some of them have gone into some detail indicating that they want to strip the NRA of its ability to lobby for the Second Amendment, and however they're going to do that, I don't know. But 3 out of the 5 have said, we want to take on the NRA, and that's Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Mike Bloomberg. The 2 that didn't mention it, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, you just never know, they just didn't mention it. The next one down is requiring a national permit or a nationally issued license to purchase a firearm. And 3 out of 5 have endorsed that idea. That's Mayor Pete, Elizabeth Warren, and guess who? Mike Bloomberg. The other 2, Bernie Sanders and Amy Klobuchar, well, they just didn't mention it. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to do something with it if they become the candidate or if they actually get elected as president. 3 out of 5 want to ban or further restrict or criminalize straw purchases. Pete and Amy didn't mention it. Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, and Mike Bloomberg have all mentioned that. Now, I'm not too awful concerned about that one. Straw purchasing ain't a real good idea. So if you want to toughen that one up and really enforce it, yeah, I might. That's the only one of all these 23 individual Second Amendment challenges that I could actually say that's not a bad idea. To ban 3D printing or to ban online blueprints for 3D printing of firearms. 4 out of 5 have endorsed that. Pete Buttigieg just didn't mention it. There's a couple of loopholes that they want to close. One is the Charleston loophole, and if you remember a couple of years ago, the young fella that shot up the church in Charleston, South Carolina, which is where it got its name, is the Charleston loophole. He went to buy a gun. The feds have 3 days to reply back yes or no, and if they exceed the 3 days, it becomes a default to proceed, and that's what happened in this kid's case in Charleston, South Carolina. They went beyond the 3 days. It was a default to purchase. He purchased it, shot up the church. So they want to close that. They want to give the feds as much time as needed to come up with a decision on whether an individual person can buy a gun or not. The other is the boyfriend loophole. And what they want to do there is restrict the purchase of firearms or the ownership of firearms for anybody convicted of domestic violence, whether it's a felony level or misdemeanor level, or that they are under a restraining order relating to a domestic situation. So 4 out of 5 think that's a real good idea. Bernie doesn't mention it. 3 out of 5 want to raise the age. 2 of the 3 say to 21. The other one just says it needs to be raised above 18. The 2 that didn't mention it, Bernie and Pete. 2 have endorsed safe storage requirements. A safe someplace, whatever, but they want to criminalize unsafe storage, I guess, is the real bottom line here. And that's Pete Buttigieg and Mike Bloomberg. To implement a standard waiting period requirement. So you go into the gun shop, you want to, hey, I'll buy that one. You got to wait however many days. They haven't really defined it. It could be 2 days, 3 days, a week. Not quite sure, but that's, I guess, part of the art of compromise. Who knows? 3 out of 5, Amy, Elizabeth Warren, and Mike Bloomberg have endorsed waiting period requirements. Reporting of lost and stolen firearms. 2, Pete and Mike Bloomberg have endorsed that idea that you're going to have to, and you'll be forced to, report lost or stolen guns within X period of time from the theft, or from when you should have known that the theft occurred. And I'm not sure what that means, but it doesn't look good. 3 out of 5 want to increase funding for gun violence research. That would be Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, and Mike Bloomberg. 2 of the 5 want to expand funding for increased ATF oversight. And what I think that means is they want to be able to crack down on FFLs, the license holders, for any kind of infraction, but they want to give them a $100 million increase in their budget specifically to monitor and crack down on FFL owners. 2 out of 5 of that, Elizabeth Warren and Mike Bloomberg. Same 2 want to expand gun-free zones to include not only schools, the K through 12, but colleges and universities as well. And that would be Elizabeth Warren and Mike Bloomberg. 3 of the 5 want to repeal the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, the PLCAA, which would, right now, the manufacturers of firearms have this protection so that they don't end up becoming the victims of malicious lawsuits for the misuse of their products. 3 out of 5 want to repeal that law and allow gun manufacturers to become liable for the misuse of their product. And that's the only other way that I figure I can make that understandable. 2 out of 5, Elizabeth Warren and Mike Bloomberg endorse regulating guns and all firearms under the auspices of the Consumer Protection Safety Commission. So like your toasters and microwave ovens and stuff like that, same kind of regulations and stuff. The same 2, Elizabeth Warren and Mike Bloomberg, want to restrict purchases to at a minimum of 1 per month, or require the reporting of multiple purchases within a short period of time, somewhat undefined short period of time. So those 2 think that's a real good idea too. 3 out of 5 want to ban accessories. And I'm going to lump it all together: silencers, bump stocks, trigger cranks, and any device that would change a semi-automatic to an automatic. That's 3. Amy, Elizabeth Warren, and Mike Bloomberg. That's just 23. There were more. There were a few more individual things that either Elizabeth Warren or Mike Bloomberg want to do that they've included in their Second Amendment challenge. I find it very disheartening that these folks have taken a pledge to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And the last time I looked, the Second Amendment is part of that same Constitution that they swore that they would protect and defend. But every single one of the leading candidates in the 2020 Democrat primary have come out with something that will challenge our rights to keep and bear arms. Remember this when you go to the polls and you vote in your primaries. Remember this when you go to the polls in November for the presidential election. There isn't a single Democrat candidate that has a platform that supports the Second Amendment, and don't forget it. This is the Prepared Suburbanite reminding you to be prepared always, and I'll see you all on the next video.